Good afternoon, everyone. We have quite a crowd online, so thanks everyone for joining. Welcome. In this session today, we're going to bring Axual founder and CEO Jeroen van Disseldorp and Adrian Gurnett, technology architect manager at PTSB, to explore the real-world journey of implementing an event-driven architecture in this case in PTSB, so financial services. What you'll hear or learn about is how PTSB moved from initially a POC for mainframe offloading to launching a full payments engine in just, well, we'll share later how many months, but it's a short amount of time, and that was all to meet the SEPA Instant Payment deadlines. Well, most importantly, this conversation goes beyond theory. It is and supposed to be a practical look at the unexpected challenges, the lessons learned, and the solutions that actually worked. And obviously, throughout the session, you're going to learn about the pains. If there are any questions, feel free to post those in the chat. I'll be able to see those, and either we handle them throughout the session or at the end. And just for practical purposes, the session will be recorded as well. And if you have to leave early, we will be able to share the recording afterwards. But without further ado, let's go to Jeroen.
All right, thank you very much, Jelle. We're going to talk about event-driven architecture. No matter how many slides you see about event-driven architecture, we all know that the real life is a lot messier. So that's why we have Adrian here with us today to talk about, how event-driven architecture was implemented at PTSB. Initially we thought at Axual also that working with Apache Kafka was going to be hard and because of all the complex technology, but turned out that was not actually true. Organizational issues proved to be a lot harder to solve, like who actually owns the data, can we touch the mainframe before Q4, who's the business owner of the Kafka platform itself, and why do we have 7 different queues for one payment flow? PTSB has been discussing these issues back and forth as well, but despite the hair-pulling moments, they've managed to launch live use cases, keep customers happy, and plan for scale. Welcome, Adrian from PTSB. Together we will dive into how they did it and what they do differently if they could hit rewind.
Thank you, Jeroen. Excited to be here.
Good. So let's start at the beginning. Why did PTSB decide to move towards event-driven architecture? What problems were you trying to solve?
Yeah, so at PTSB, our overarching goal is very clear. We want to deliver an exceptional customer experience that's fast, secure, reliable across every channel.
Understood. And but you weren't already there.
No, yeah. So the reality was, like many banks, our technology landscape was heavily reliant on traditional, tightly coupled systems, and a lot of batch-oriented processing. So that kind of setup served us well in the past. It was predictable, it was safe, but as customer behavior shifted, it did start to hold us back.
Right. But those legacy systems aren't going to go away anytime soon. So what did you do about that?
So yeah, we purposely included a modern event streaming platform that enables data flows in near real time across all systems. That means one team can publish events, and many others can consume them independently. And it means developers don't have to wait on downstream teams to release features. They can innovate much faster in parallel as well. And for customers, that means a far more personalized real-time experience. And ultimately, adopting event-driven architecture is about enabling PTSB to achieve its 2030 ambition, which is to be Ireland's best personal and business bank.
Okay, sounds like a promising future. It must be exciting to be part of a team that is working on the realization of this vision. Let's talk about where you guys got started. Your first use case went live in payments, right? Was that the right place to start?
Well, interestingly, our very first step into event-driven architecture wasn't actually payments, funnily enough. We began much smaller than that with a proof of concept, which is focused on mainframe offloading, working closely with yourselves, Axual. And that proof of concept was very deliberate, I would say. We weren't trying to transform the bank overnight. We just wanted to prove the fundamentals. So such as, could the platform handle events reliably? Could it integrate with our existing systems? And just as importantly, could our engineers get comfortable with a brand new set of tools and practices?
Right. And how did that POC work out?
Well, the good news is it worked. That initial success gave us a lot of confidence. I would say it moved us from an experiment in the lab, so to speak, to asking a bigger question, which is, where should we go first now for our full production use case?
Right, right. And that was the payments use case, right?
Correct. Yes, indeed. Yeah. So very quickly we started to look at payments, and when you step back, it makes a lot of sense, to be honest. Payments touches almost every corner of the bank. There's also naturally high volume associated with that, which makes it a great fit for event-driven design. And there was also a very clear regulatory driver as well, which was the SEPA Instant Payments deadline in January 2025, and that gave us a sense of urgency as well.
Right. Sounds promising. Well, of course, when you start with payments, that's going to be really impactful across the whole bank. This is, of course, your core business. That must have created a big audience as well within PTSB. Maybe people eager to see if you could pull it off?
Yes, indeed. Very much so. Beyond those practical drivers, there was a lot of visibility, certainly. Payments, as you know, are tangible. When stakeholders saw money moving instantly and compliance checks running, silently and smoothly in the background, it began to really hit home with them. And I would say that visibility was powerful. It certainly built confidence across the bank, and I would say it created momentum for the broader program as well.
Right. Great to hear. So yeah, let's talk about where it got tricky. Like, what were the real pains? What were the things that you did not see coming? Can you take us through some of those?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest surprises for us was ownership when I'm looking back at it. So like an enterprise data architecture, you usually think about who owns the data or who owns the applications. What we hadn't really thought through was who owns the platform itself, which in this case is Kafka. And we learned very quickly that Kafka isn't something you just install and forget about. It is a strategic product for the whole organization. And so that's what led us to stand up a Kafka Center of Excellence, which was our very first Center of Excellence in the bank, and which was a big learning curve for us as an organization, as you can imagine. And honestly, I would say having Axual guide us, along that journey step by step has been critical in making that real for us.
Oh, really? In what way?
So I'd say at its heart, the Center of Excellence exists to do a few important things. It would be there to promote best practices, so teams don't reinvent the wheel every time. It's there to govern Kafka as a platform, making sure topics, clusters, changes follow the right life cycle. I would say it acts as a knowledge hub and a consultancy, so teams can get advice and patterns for their use cases. And it's there to make sure everything we deploy is secure, observable, scalable, compliant. The scope covers every producer and consumer connected to the platform, and it extends out into the ecosystem as well. So things like Kafka connectors, such as Debezium, Kafka streams, and a Kafka schema registry as well.
Right, right. So that Center of Excellence is not just the team that manages your Kafka. In that sense, they do a lot more than system maintenance.
No, yeah. So the objectives of the Center of Excellence are really about giving teams the tools and the guardrails, so to speak, to succeed. We're at the moment defining standards and blueprints, so people don't start from a blank page, so to speak. We're establishing reusable frameworks and patterns, so streaming becomes faster to adopt, and that's a key bit for us. We're also investing in onboarding and training, so developers feel confident. And we're also governing the essentials as well around naming conventions, retention policies, access control lists, ACLs, so things stay consistent as well.
Right, right. And so how did this go? Because you indicated earlier that this was your very first COE. How did you get them in the right place, in the right mindset? How did they even know which standards to set?
Now, I won't pretend that it's all been smooth. I'll be lying otherwise. So for example, in payments, when the pressure was on, engineers at the time defaulted to JSON because it was quick and familiar to them. But at an engineering level, we'd standardize on Avro. So the Center of Excellence stepped in at that point, not in a heavy-handed way, from a governance point of view, but kind of more along with guides, sample codes, and kind of clear articulated trade-offs. And that gave the engineers confidence and helped everyone align then without slowing down. And I would say we're also standing up a governance bodies to give this structure as well. A review boards, so to speak, to look at architecture decisions, a change board to review major requests like topics or ACLs, and a user groups then as well for community and knowledge sharing. So this isn't really about bureaucracy. It's more about creating the guardrails and forums for collaboration, ultimately.
Okay, so you're not enforcing standards, but you are still a bank, right? So you have to have some governance practices in place. So what does the COE exactly help with, and how does that fit in with the rest of the bank's governance?
Yeah, so around that, the Center of Excellence is putting in place practical processes. So again, around topic lifecycle management through essential registry, which is important. Access control through identity access management and least privilege access control lists. Schema governance with our compatibility rules kind of enforced. Monitoring integrated with tools like Prometheus, Grafana, Splunk. So it's kind of interoperable in that way. And also with our SLAs for availability and latency as well. And a developer enablement track as well. We're working on with training around office hours as well, and essential knowledge base. Now it's all early days with all this, but these processes are what make Kafka feel like a managed product rather than just another piece of tech in the corner.
Check. But Adrian, I assume that this is done next to the existing ways of doing integration, right?
Yes, of course, absolutely. So Kafka isn't always the answer. You always have to pick the right tool for the job, so to speak. So where strict ordering or guaranteed delivery is critical for a requirement. We still use IBM MQ, for example, which is, we use that in the bank a lot. The Center of Excellence is even publishing decision trees, so teams can quickly decide, is this a Kafka job or is this an MQ job? And that's proven to be an effective tool for us.
Right. And what are your experience with the COE thus far? Does it really help guide the teams? Does it help in getting them familiar with the new technology?
The hardest part hasn't been the technology at all, actually. It's been the people side, I would say. So onboarding, adoption, changing ways of working. But that's also where we've seen some of the most rewarding progress as well, I would say. So developers getting comfortable, trusting the platform itself is growing, and a real community is forming around it as well, which is really positive to see. If I had to sum up where it got tricky, yeah, it wasn't just the tech. It was ownership, I'd say governance and culture, most of all, I think. And building that Kafka Center of Excellence as well, even though it is early days for us, with a clear purpose, broad scope and practical objectives as well. And again, with Axual helping us along the way, that's made all the difference to us.
Nice. And so with all those challenges, how were you able to keep on moving forwards?
Yeah, I'd say the single biggest hurdle was onboarding teams. I would say, again, with technology, you can usually solve problems if you throw enough time and expertise at them. But adoption at scale, that's a different challenge, because you're not just teaching people how to use a tool, so to speak. You're asking them, to change their habits, to trust a new way of working, and to get out of the comfort of what they already know. That's why we launched what we call the MVP, Kafka Center of Excellence. It's our minimal viable product, and they are the one-stop shop for onboarding teams. It wasn't just about building the perfect solution from day one. It was about just creating something that would actually help teams get started quickly. And what we did was we pulled together documentation, tools like decision trees, as I said, best practices, step-by-step guides. And the idea then was, make it simple and make it possible for teams to become productive really quickly, without needing to be Kafka experts from day one. And because we initially, framed the Center of Excellence as an MVP, we gave ourselves, permission to evolve it, so to speak. We knew we wouldn't get everything right from, the first time, but that was the whole point. Teams, by doing and keeping improving as we went along, essentially.
Right. That's actually very clever to label that as MVP. Must have been taking off the pressure a lot for the COE team as well, because this is the first time that you ever set up a COE, right? So I imagine that they would need to, learn and get familiar with their own services towards the rest of the organization as well. And on top of that, they need to get familiar with Kafka, of course.
Yeah. Now, while that was happening internally, we leaned heavily on Axual's managed service, I have to say. And honestly, that partnership was critical for us to get to where we are today. So it meant we didn't have to reinvent the wheel every time we ran into some operational challenge, whether it was scaling or with the observability around the tool, the platform, or governance itself. And your on-site visits really stood out as well, I think. Having their, your engineers in the room working, shoulder to shoulder, so to speak, with our own team, like that built a huge amount of trust as well, day to day. And it kind of, reassured our engineers and that we had experts back up as well when we needed it. And that was huge. And it reassured the business leaders as well that this wasn't just another IT, experimenting with shiny new tech. This was a serious enterprise grade platform that we were rolling out and something we could depend on.
Right. No, well, that's of course very great, very good to hear. And I'm glad we were able to help you out and get you guys started in that way. So when did you get the first signals that what you were doing was working?
Yeah, I think one of the moments that really stuck with me came from, if I think about it, there was an early adopter team. And funnily enough, it wasn't even to do with payments, actually. They were experimenting in a development environment with some new requirements that they were dealing with. And none of them have Kafka experience at the time. And yet, within roughly a week, they'd gone from 0 to publishing their very first event. And, for them, I guess that was a small milestone. But for us, I mean, that was a proof point. It showed a combination of the MVP Center of Excellence and Axual's tooling really lowered that barrier to entry, so to speak. And it proved that teams, didn't have to climb a big steep learning curve before they could get value. And Kafka is complex. There's lots of resources out there, but this was really strong for us to see that. And naturally enough, as you can imagine, that story spread quickly across the organization, and it changed the conversation as well. So suddenly Kafka wasn't this, this intimidating, highly specialized platform. It was something teams could actually get working with quickly and with confidence as well. And that's been our approach all along. I would say it was to make adoption as easy as possible. Build that internal capability steadily and bring in that internal expertise then where it accelerates the journey for us.
Okay, so the COE, even in its MVP form, became the central go-to hub for everything EDA and Kafka related?
Indeed, yeah. It gave teams a place to ask questions, I would say, to find reasonable patterns, to avoid repeating mistakes, which is important, and others, had already made along the way. So basically lessons learned essentially. And importantly, it created, consistency as well. Instead of every team having to invent their own way of doing something, we could guide them through decision trees, again, like I mentioned, which have been a very useful tool for us. When to use Kafka, when not to use Kafka, how to design your schemas, how to stay compliant. That give leadership confidence that, governance wasn't bolted on later by us. It was baked in from the start.
Right. But you also had to make sure that you would keep moving forward.
Yes, indeed. So we combined structure with support, and that structure came from the Center of Excellence, even in its MVP form. The support came from Axual as well with their managed service, and the trust it created both technically and culturally as well. And together they made it possible for teams to keep progressing even while we were still figuring out, the long-term operating model.
Okay. And so now that payment is live, what value are you seeing today?
Yeah, so payments going live really was a milestone for us, I have to say, for the bank, and it delivers immediate value. From a standing start, the team built a full payments engine, wait for it, in just 7 months to meet the SEPA instant deadline for inward payment processing. I mean, that's just nuts. It's a fantastic achievement for the bank and the teams involved. And in a bank of our size, that is no small feat. Normally problems of this scale can run for years, not surprisingly. You have multiple dependencies and shifting priorities, all that type of thing. But here we had a clear regulatory deadline, a brand new architecture approach, and a delivery window of just a few months as well. So, that forced us to focus, to strip away unnecessary kind of complexity and noise, and, to prove we could, move at a different pace. And the impact was very real. We now have, real-time sanction scanning in place, which is fantastic, with payments processing, like I said, in under 10 seconds, which was a regulatory deadline requirement. And that's a complete shift from the days of batch-based processing, where payments might sit in a queue waiting for the next window to clear. Now the customer sees the results immediately. It's faster, it's more transparent, delivers a much smoother experience, and all while keeping us fully compliant, which is pretty cool.
Right.
So the bigger story is, what's happened around that delivery. What started out as a single integration for payments has now grown into an enterprise-wide Kafka platform, which is excellent. And that platform is no longer just about payments as well. It's shaping the way we architect solutions all across the bank.
Okay, across the entire bank. So yeah, can you give an example?
Yep, so take governance and standards. For example, we've put in place strong guardrails through the Kafka Center of Excellence again. So when a new team comes on board, they're not reinventing the wheel. They can see where the topics already exist, which is really important for us in terms of discovery. So they can reuse patterns, they can follow proven guidelines, and that has reduced the onboarding dramatically for us. And it's given, again, the leadership confidence that innovation is happening in a kind of controlled, compliant and repeatable way, which is important for us as a bank because we're very risk averse. It's also unlocked many new ways of thinking for teams that used to depend on overnight batch jobs or tightly coupled point-to-point integrations are starting to ask a very different question now, which they're asking, could this be an event when they're designing their solutions? And that's not something they would have done before. And that's a question. And that question itself, that's powerful because it forces them to think then about agility, about real-time processing, about decoupling systems so they can evolve independently. So really, really interesting kind of software development can happen because of the back of that, and adding business value as a result. And that's not just a technical shift, that's a cultural one as well.
Right, terrific. And are there any other departments that have now begun to use the Kafka platform?
Yes, the installation is, like I said, that's not limited to just payments. The platform is already being lined up for mortgages, fraud monitoring, customer servicing. So, for example, in fraud, we'll now have the ability to stream events in real time, which opens up opportunities for faster detection and intervention, especially things around cards, where lost and stolen cards come into play. That'll be crucially important for us. In mortgages, it means we can simplify, complex workflows that are there that have to be managed through manual steps today or overnight batches. And in customer servicing, it means frontline colleagues have instant access to the to the most up-to-date information, meaning both efficiency and customer satisfaction. So what began as a regulatory-driven project is now becoming, a foundation for scalable innovation right across the bank. And I'd say that shift from we have to do this to we can now build on this, is hugely significant for us.
I can imagine it must be really exciting as well to be the architect that drives this renewal and innovation mindset throughout the organization.
Yeah, so for me, the real value today, that's the real value today, I would say, definitely. Yes, we met a hard deadline. We delivered instant payments with real-time compliance and a fully governed platform. But more importantly, we've laid down a modern event streaming backbone, one with governance baked in from day one as well, which is crucially important, not added on later. And I would say one that's already shaping the future architecture of the bank, and one that's enabling us to move at a completely different pace to what we would have done before.
Right, right. And so what's on your roadmap next?
Yeah, so we're excited about the next one, actually. One of the biggest next steps for us is the enterprise notification solution, which we're currently working on with our teams at the moment. So right now, notifications are fragmented for ourselves, the bank, and how we notify customers. So today, customers might get an SMS, they might get a letter in the post, or they might only see the alert when they've logged into the app or the website. Push notifications, we do use those, but they're only used in very specific cases, such as SCA, which is strong customer authentication. And while we do send some emails, they're only used in a very minor way today.
Okay, but how will this new notification system bring innovation for customers then?
Yeah, so what we're building is a single real-time capability that will bring all of those channels together and deliver a consistent notification across every product journey in the bank, which is really, really cool for us. And over time, our goal is to then shift as much as possible to push notifications mainly because there's a lower cost with that, and it's also more secure because we'll be delivering those push notifications directly to a customer's enrolled device, again, which is part of PSD2 with SCA. So yes, this solution will cover instant payment alerts initially, which are critical. But more importantly, it will unlock notifications, across all departments and services within the bank. And I would say in the future, it will also provide notification capabilities for mortgages, loans, current accounts, savings, essentially any customer interaction that we'd have. So imagine applying for a mortgage and getting status updates in near real time. I'm a mortgage customer myself. That would be a very cool thing to have. So I'd be very excited about that. Or also receiving alerts the moment your savings goal is reached. Again, another nice tool, especially for maybe our teenage customer cohorts. Incentivizing saving goals and things like that. So that's where all this is heading for us.
Right. And you consider streaming to be the key ingredient for those new notifications?
Yes. Under the hood, we're using stream processing, compaction topics as well, and connectors like Debezium for change data capture. So, that combination gives us a single source of truth for each event key. So while keeping our workflows lightweight and maintainable. And for customers, that means transparency and speed. And for us, it means operational simplicity as well.
Right. You mentioned stream processing. I know there's a world of stream processing frameworks out there. Are your teams, who sometimes may come from the very old integration world, are they ready for these new technologies?
Yeah, so we've kind of recently just started to experiment with KSML, which is your company's low-code framework for stream processing. We see that as a big enabler, actually. That's a very exciting feature that your platform offers. And it lets us standardize patterns and makes stream-based apps much easier for teams to build and maintain. It just makes it much more accessible. And again, that lower barrier of entry, right? Not everyone needs to be a Kafka expert to add value. And we see KSML can help with that capability and making it accessible across the organization for us.
All right, great. And so what else are you working on?
So yeah, beyond notifications, we've got several high-value use cases as well in the pipeline. So I kind of touched on it there briefly a while ago. So one of the most exciting ones is mortgage in-life servicing, which is part of our Own My Home value stream. That it starts by giving us customer access to their mortgage details and the ability to make kind of simple self-service changes, like adjusting their payment dates through a portal. That's big because today they have to ring up a call center to do that or something. So it's reducing that cost to serve us greatly when that gets rolled out. And it improves convenience for the customer as well ultimately. But the next phase is even bigger than that. And this is one I'm getting really excited about as well, because again, I'm a mortgage customer, where you'll be able to choose a new mortgage rate from within the app as well. Well, that'd be nice. A bit of a game changer, I hope, really. And that's a huge step forward in transparency and efficiency for us. And again, it lowers that cost to serve, and it automates as well what was once a manual process.
Okay, so it sounds like you're really driving a wave of innovation throughout the bank. Do these new developments require any platform changes too? And how is the COE involved in all of this?
Yes, well, the Center of Excellence is involved both operationally as well as consultatively, so to speak. Since delivering these use cases, it isn't just about the technology. We're also maturing our operating model. And I'll be honest about it, that will take time, as you can imagine. But we've put in place a central platform team, early days, but we're rolling that out now, whose role is to enable stream-aligned delivery teams to use the platform more effectively. Axual is embedded within that team during the rollout as well. And together, as a partnership, we're kind of planning that future roadmap, so to speak, prioritizing our backlog from internal feedback with developers, and coordinate, with both enabling the team and our OpenShift platform architects as well. Day-to-day, Axual also monitors the platform alongside our observability team with access to alerts and logs, which is important. And that means the platform is being operated safely while it continues to evolve strategically. And I would say that the operating model objectives are very clear. We want to ensure developers have the autonomy to use the event platform through self-service. And that's critically important for us. We don't want any kind of friction or blockers in that kind of regard or handoffs. So without needing to manage the platform itself, Axual supports federated governance with decentralized execution, which is excellent. And that means developer teams can, onboard via self-service UI or RESTful API as well as part of their pipelines. So with a quick startup and no tickets or lengthy handoffs, there's very little friction involved. And I would say we're also continuing to refine our architecture patterns. A key question around is always, when is Kafka the right choice? When is IBM the better fit? MQ remains critical, where we do need strict ordering and guaranteed delivery, as I mentioned before. And Kafka does excel in its scalability and kind of real-time distribution. And by publishing tools like decision trees and patterns to that center of excellence, we've given teams the confidence to pick the right tool for the job, essentially, without any hesitation.
Okay, nice. So given your experience thus far, what would you say to other banks or financial services organizations that are thinking about EDA? Do you have any advice that you would want to give them?
So yeah, I'd say the first thing is this: start small and prove value quickly. Very simple sentence, but it's quite powerful.
Right.
Event-driven architecture can feel like a huge, intimidating shift if you only talk about it in theory, right? But if you pick the right use case, something that's visible, that touches multiple teams, has a clear business value as well, you can show results fast, get that fast feedback loop without overwhelming the organization. Those quick wins, they create momentum, and they build a bit of credibility to them with leadership as well, which is crucial, to getting that more, onward investment. And to give delivery teams confidence as well that this new way of working actually works. You're building that trust with them. I would say the second piece is around ownership. In traditional IT, you think about who owns the application or who owns the data, as I mentioned before. But with EDA, there's a third dimension, who owns the platform itself. And that's a big deal because platforms like Kafka, they are strategic, they're complex. They're not something you just install and forget about. They need constant care. So they need a team that treats the platform like a product in its own right, with its own roadmap, uptime commitments, security standards, performance goals, that type of thing. So we learned that defining ownership early saved us a huge amount of pain later on. If you don't end up with, if you end up with blurred accountability, and worse, a platform no one really feels responsible for, that's not great.
Yep, makes sense.
And I would say thirdly, maybe the most important advice is this. Remember that technology is only half the journey. Make it easy for people to use. I know that sounds obvious, but it's easy to overlook. If adoption feels hard in any way, like if there's friction there, if developers feel like they need to become Kafka experts, they have to go off reading books, go through YouTube playlists for hours and hours before they can, publish their first event, for example, that'll stall adoption. That will be hard. So that's why we invested in good training, good tooling around that, clear processing, strong documentation as well, simple steps. And so, for example, we publish decision trees, like I keep coming back to that, a really useful tool for us here in this scenario. Code samples, step-by-step how-to guides, just very clear and articulated well to our center of excellence. And I would say that dramatically lowered the barrier to entry. And it, let us create champions then inside the business units as well. So that empowered those people to go off and, champion the platform and the technology and sell that as well to other teams. And teams could then, they could see how to get started. They could see how to stay compliant and how to avoid, the common pitfalls that they always come into without having to relearn the same lessons the hard way, ultimately. And I'd say finally, don't underestimate the value of partnership as well. Whether it's with a vendor like yourselves, Axual, or with peers, in your own industry. Having access to people, who've done this before, it can accelerate your learning curve. And in our case, we found huge value in working with Axual. You've massive subject matter expertise within your team. And they, guide us through the tricky early stages for sure. We needed our hand holding. I've no shame in saying that. And that, that gave us confidence as well, and helped build that trust with the stakeholders as well.
Awesome. Yeah.
So if I had to sum it all up, My advice is this: 5 key points to take away for the audience here today. So number 1, start small. Number 2, define your ownership. Number 3, make it easy. Make it easy. Keep the friction out of it for developers. I'm a developer myself in my previous role. I know if there's any bit of friction at all, it will stop you from adopting something. So make it as easy as possible. Put in the groundwork early on for that. Focus on people. And then I would say finally, lean in on partners then as well, where it makes sense to do so. So do those 5 things, and the transition to event-driven architecture becomes much smoother, faster, and ultimately much more rewarding. Okay, thank you so much, Adrian. That was an honest, practical, and incredibly helpful conversation. Thanks, and I think we're going to the questions now. Jelle.
Yeah, correct. Thanks both. This was very insightful, and we indeed throughout the session got a few questions in via Q&A. Kind of like while talking, I'm restructuring which ones can go together, etc. So bear with me. Let's start with one on the decision and the technology decision framework. You mentioned, or you described that you developed decision trees to help teams choose between IBM, MQ, and Kafka for different use cases. A question from someone online is, could you walk us through a specific example of when you'd recommend sticking with MQ versus moving to Kafka? Yeah, that's a great question. Because one of the early lessons we learned is that Kafka isn't always the right answer, right? There are still plenty of use cases where MQ is still the better fit. So for example, when we're integrating asynchronously with some of our legacy core banking systems within the bank, those systems typically only understand the MQ protocol, which is understandable because they are legacy. And in those cases, MQ remains essential in that regard. It's tried and tested, and it's been designed for that exact purpose. We also made a distinction between commands and events as well. So commands, which is typically do this, update that, they're generally point-to-point type integrations and work best with MQ, it's been seen. And where strict ordering and guaranteed delivery are critical as well. Events, on the other hand, this has happened. Anyone who cares can subscribe to these type of things, are more naturally decoupled and scale, much better on a Kafka site. And that's why we built decision trees then around that into our center of excellence. They give teams that bit of simple guidance, essentially. If you're issuing commands into a legacy system, MQ is your tool of choice. If you're publishing events to enable broader, reuse and real-time data insights, Kafka is the right choice. So that clarity has helped teams move quickly and confidently, I would say, without second guessing the whole time. Great. Thanks for sharing, Adrian. We got another question in, and we partially covered it already, but let's still see if there's some additional information. Question is, besides Kafka, was any specific technology used for event processing, like Apache Flink? We did cover that partially with KSML. Jeroen, is there perhaps something from your perspective that you would like to add on KSML, what it can do or how it compares to Flink, etc.?
There's a bit of an overlap, but I think ultimately KSML is meant for the easy get-going use cases where you need to just modify a field, update a field in an Avro message, or convert it from JSON to XML or something like that. KSML is able, to do some state store management, but ultimately when you do stream processing, you would like to have some more enterprise-grade state store management and snapshot features, and I think that's where Apache Flink ultimately comes in. So I would position KSML as being useful for like the bottom 50-60% of use cases, and Apache Flink for more like the upper level, the more complex use cases, the upper 50-60%. And they, of course, they share some overlap in the middle, but that's where the use case itself has to make a choice, what to grow into. Does it need to scale? Does it need to be future-proof in some way? And then you can decide for one over the other. But ultimately, KSML is intended for the starting audience to get going with stream processing in an easy way without requiring too much knowledge of Apache Kafka in detail.
Great. Another question that came in, not specifically for either of you. Are there any topic naming standards, for instance, are they prefixed with team names, etc.? So are there any topic naming standards?
I think this is one for you, Adrian. Did you implement topic naming standards in PTSB?
Yeah, I could take that one. Yeah, so internally for us, we kind of landed on a naming convention at the moment, which is around kind of environment, business unit, domain, event name. So that might typically, as an example, that might translate into prod as production, finance for your business unit, payments for your domain, and transaction for an event name. And that's kind of where we started off initially, and it's working quite well for us. And obviously, we'll evolve this over time as well. And we've worked with Axual on this and trying to kind of work out, what's typically industry best standard and what you've seen with your clients and other organizations. This is where I touch on the partnership and leaning in on the expertise. This is where we've touched in with you guys to kind of get that bit of insight, because otherwise that would have taken us quite a lot of time to try and figure out, reaching out to our own networks and things like that. So we were able to kind of standardize on that pretty quickly, I would say, in the payments domain. And that was hugely important for us. So yeah, that's a simple example I can give you straight off the bat. Great.
Thanks, Adrian. One other question that is mentioned, I think this one might be for you, Jeroen. Splunk as well as Grafana got mentioned. There's an overlap in functionality there between those two. Can you elaborate on which one you use for which particular purpose?
Splunk and Grafana. Well, I think Splunk is mostly used for capturing all the log information from a certain system. So in the case of the Kafka platform itself, you would capture all the logging information from the platform itself and capture that in Splunk to make it searchable for system admins trying to keep the system running and predictably available. Whereas Grafana sort of like gives you the performance insights. So how does it perform? How much is the load across brokers? How much data is pumped through the platform? So it gives you much more the performance angle, not so much the uptime or the incident resolution angle.
Great. I hope that answers the questions for the people online. If not, and this goes for the entire session and all the questions that have been asked or the ones that have not been asked, feel free to reach out afterwards. We're also going to share the recording. We're going to be in contact anyway, right? So we can answer anything that needs to be answered. Let's do one final question. Also looking at the time. Probably also for you, this one, Jeroen. Having worked with multiple financial services organizations, what unique challenges do you see in the banking sector compared to other industries when it comes to EDA adoption? For example, in finance, is regulatory compliance with DORA. Does that, for example, influence the platform?
Yeah, I think, well, coming from a finance background, we heavily let finance influence the way we set up our platform. So we designed it to be compliant from the start by connecting people to the technical resources like topics and applications and certificates and all that. And I think that's what the platform really excels at. And that's also how we implemented it at PTSB, by making teams owners of the technical resources. Everybody in the organization can still, play their role according to what compliancy rules dictate. And by doing that, you're not going to put any responsibility that a person in payments may have on a central Kafka team. And I think that is essential for maintaining governance across the organization. You don't want to have this godlike team that is all of a sudden able to see all data or to configure everything or get their hands on data that they're not supposed to have. So the platform is really designed to shield against that and to allow everybody to play their role that they already have in the organization. Without creating new admin godlike roles.
Great. Thanks, Jeroen. And I think now would actually be the time to round things up. We have actually probably quite a list still of questions that came in. What I suggest we do is we take those offline with those individuals. We can talk for hours probably about this subject. For now, let's keep it at this. Jeroen and Adrian, both very much thankful. Thank you for your insights. This was very helpful. And again, we'll be sharing the recording and connecting with everyone afterwards. Enjoy your day. Good luck.